I am Avery, 26 years old, and for most of my life, I believed the glittering pieces of jewelry I inherited were more than just ornaments. They were fragments of my identity, threads that tied me to the memory of my grandmother, who had once whispered to me that every gem carried not only weight but history. I remember the nights I would open the velvet-lined box and touch each piece, as if I were touching a fragment of her spirit, her resilience, her strength, her quiet defiance against the world that never gave her anything easily. To me, those pieces were not about wealth or vanity. They were promises, silent oaths of endurance, reminders that even when life strips you bare, there can still be something sacred left to hold on to. I wore them sparingly, on birthdays or moments I needed courage, because they weren't trophies to flaunt but shields to protect me. I saved every dollar I earned during my part-time jobs in college, resisted every temptation to sell or pawn them when bills piled up, and lived frugally, all because I knew they represented my sacrifices. My parents would laugh sometimes and say, "They're just old trinkets," dismissing the glow in my eyes whenever I polished them. But I carried their weight proudly, like medals earned through hardship. In the mirror, when I clasped the necklace around my throat, I saw not just a young woman but a survivor who refused to crumble. To outsiders, I was merely the quiet daughter, overshadowed by my sister's glamour, her charm, her ability to capture our parents' attention with a single smile. But inside I knew that every jewel was proof that my life had meaning. My grandmother had told me that life is full of thefts, people stealing your time, your peace, your dignity, but if I guarded these treasures, I would always have a reminder of who I truly was. Little did I know that one day, the very people I trusted the most, the ones whose approval I longed for, would take from me the last sacred thing I had left. And that act, cruel and unthinkable, would not just break me, it would awaken something in me that none of them were prepared for. The day it happened still clings to my memory like smoke that refuses to clear. I had returned home from a long shift, my body aching but my spirit comforted by the thought of checking on the jewelry box tucked safely inside my wardrobe. I remember humming softly as I walked down the hallway, the hum dying on my lips the moment I noticed my closet door ajar. A detail so small yet so alarming that my stomach instantly tightened. My fingers trembled as I pulled open the wardrobe, and when I saw the empty space where the velvet box should have been, the world tilted violently. At first, I thought I must have misplaced it. That fatigue had clouded my memory, but when I turned toward the dresser, I noticed the dustless square imprint where the box had rested for years, undisturbed. My chest constricted, panic surged through me, and I stumbled out of my room calling for my mother, my voice cracking. She appeared from the kitchen, and before I could ask, before I could demand, her eyes darted to my father, who walked in from the living room with a heavy sigh, followed by my sister, dressed in a silk robe, her face glowing with a satisfaction that I couldn't yet comprehend. "Avery," my father said in a tone both stern and weary, "we had to make a decision." I asked where my jewelry was, my voice quivering between rage and desperation. My sister smirked faintly, and that smirk pierced me more deeply than any blade could. My mother reached for my arm and whispered, "It was for the greater good, sweetheart. We sold it for your sister's wedding expenses." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The words didn't make sense, didn't align with reality. I stammered, asking why they hadn't told me, why they hadn't asked me, why they would strip me of the only inheritance I had left. My sister shrugged and said, "You weren't really using it, Avery, and besides, my wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Shouldn't family come first?" I remember the blood roaring in my ears, my heart pounding against my ribs as though it wanted to escape. Betrayal doesn't arrive gently. It crashes into you like a storm, ripping apart everything you thought was solid. In that instant, I wasn't just robbed of jewelry. I was robbed of trust, of belonging, of the illusion that family protected me. The silence that followed my outburst was deafening. And as I stood there, shaking, staring into the faces of those I once loved without question, I realized something shattering. To them, my sacrifices had never mattered. I was a resource, not a daughter. I was an afterthought, not a priority. And it was in that bitter revelation that the seeds of something darker began to sprout inside me. Seeds I would one day nurture into a plan so precise, so devastating, that they would never forget the moment they chose her wedding over my soul. I stood frozen in the middle of that suffocating living room, my chest heaving as though the very air had turned poisonous. And yet they looked back at me with eyes that carried no guilt, no recognition of the wound they had carved into me. My father's arms were crossed, his jaw clenched as he muttered, "Don't make this dramatic. Avery, we did what was necessary. Your sister's wedding needs to be perfect." And that jewelry was just sitting there, gathering dust. His words struck me harder than any slap, and I felt my lips tremble as I tried to answer. But before I could, my sister leaned against the doorway, twirling her hair and smirking with an arrogance that boiled my blood. "Honestly," she said, her voice smooth like poison, "you should be proud. You're contributing to something bigger than yourself. My marriage will elevate this family. Avery, what would your old jewelry ever accomplish?" My throat tightened, tears threatening to spill, but I forced them back, refusing to let her see me break. "It wasn't just jewelry," I whispered, each word laced with trembling rage. "It was mine. It was all I had left of Grandma, of everything she wanted me to carry forward." My mother reached for me again, her voice dripping with false sympathy as she cooed, "Darling, you'll understand one day. Families make sacrifices." My hands curled into fists, my nails biting into my palms, because I realized then that in their eyes, my sacrifice wasn't just expected, it was demanded. They didn't care what it cost me, only that it served them. And as I looked from my mother's pleading face to my father's cold stare, and finally to my sister's smug grin, something inside me hardened. I swallowed my scream, buried it deep, and let silence settle over me, because I knew that words would not change them. No outburst would restore my treasures or awaken their remorse. They had chosen their side, and I had to choose mine. My silence unnerved them. I saw it in the way my father shifted uncomfortably, in the way my mother's hand slipped from my arm, in the way my sister's smirk faltered for just a second. But I said nothing. I turned and walked away, each step heavy with betrayal, each breath laced with fire. Behind me, their voices rose, commands, justifications, attempts to reel me back into their narrative, but I kept walking, because I knew the conversation was over. They had stolen from me, and though they believed the matter settled, I had only begun to reckon with the storm they had unleashed. Deep within, a vow formed, sharp and unshakable. They would regret underestimating me. They would regret treating me as disposable. And one day, when the timing was right, I would carve my justice into the very fabric of their lives, not with screams or fists, but with a precision so devastating that they would never recover from the echo of what they had done. That night, the house felt like a stranger's home, each wall echoing with memories that suddenly tasted bitter, each photograph on the shelves mocking me with the illusion of family unity. I locked my bedroom door, sank to the floor, and for the first time in years, I cried not the quiet tears of frustration I had shed so many times in silence, but guttural, wrenching sobs that clawed their way out of my chest until my throat burned raw. I pressed my palms over my ears to drown out the muffled laughter, drifting from the living room, where my sister and parents were, still celebrating their decision as though they hadn't just shattered me. Every flashback that flooded my mind was like a shard of glass, The birthdays where my sister received lavish gifts while I got practical necessities. The family dinners where my opinions were brushed aside, but hers were praised. The countless times I had swallowed my disappointment and told myself that one day they would see me. One day they would recognize my worth. Instead, this betrayal confirmed what I had secretly feared all along. To them, I was invisible unless I could be used. I pulled my knees to my chest, my nails digging into my arms, and I whispered into the emptiness. Why wasn't I enough? The silence answered back, cold and merciless. My grandmother's voice echoed faintly in memory. Her stories of being overlooked, of surviving cruelty by staying quiet but never defeated, and that recollection twisted inside me like a blade. I realized that what hurt most wasn't the loss of gold or jewels, but the loss of faith in the people who should have been my sanctuary. They hadn't just taken my inheritance. They had confirmed that my place in their world was conditional, secondary, expendable. Rage simmered beneath the grief, hot and relentless, but I lacked the strength to wield it yet. So I sat there for hours, rocking slightly, letting every sob carve deeper grooves of determination into my soul. By dawn, my tears had dried into salt on my skin, my body trembling with exhaustion, but beneath that fragility, a new steel was forming. I stared at the ceiling, my eyes swollen and burning, and I swore silently that I would never again beg for their love or their recognition. They had written me out of their story, but I would write my own, and when my pen met paper, every stroke would be dipped in the ink of vengeance. They thought they had silenced me, but all they had done was give me a reason to speak louder than ever before. In the quiet aftermath of my tears, clarity began to take root like a stubborn plant breaking through concrete. I remembered my grandmother's words from years ago, spoken with a softness that belied their weight. Strength isn't loud, Avery. It doesn't scream or demand. It waits. It grows. And when it is ready, it moves like a tide you cannot resist. I had spent years internalizing her lessons, but the betrayal that had struck me with the force of a hurricane illuminated them in a new, brutal way. I understood now that my vengeance would not be a scream into the void. It would be calculated, measured, and unstoppable. I began sketching mental maps of how I could regain what was taken, not just my jewelry, but my dignity, my power, my place in a world that had underestimated me. Every financial decision I had ever made, every ounce of effort I had poured into my studies, into my small savings now gained renewed purpose. I would channel my grief, my anger, and my hurt into action, and I would ensure that the lesson my family had taught me, that I could be ignored, devalued, and used, would rebound upon them with a precision they could neither anticipate nor counter. The idea was intoxicating. I felt my pulse quicken with anticipation as the outlines of my plan began to form in my mind. I would rebuild, silently, from the shadows, while they remained blissfully unaware that the quiet daughter they had dismissed was already laying the foundation for a reckoning they would never see coming. I didn't need to yell, to argue, to beg for fairness. Instead, I would cultivate a power so undeniable that when I finally revealed it, it would be impossible for them to ignore, and impossible for them to escape the consequences of their actions. In that moment, grief and rage transformed into focus, an electric clarity that made every prior moment of pain feel like preparation for what was about to come. I realized that the journey ahead would be long, fraught with challenges and setbacks, but also rich with the possibility of ultimate triumph. I would not only reclaim what was stolen, I would rewrite the narrative entirely, turning the very tools of their arrogance against them. And as I lay awake that night, plotting each step with meticulous care, I whispered to myself, almost as if speaking to my grandmother's spirit, they may have taken my jewelry, that they cannot take my resolve. They will learn, Avery. They will learn what it means to underestimate me. The first seeds of my plan had been sown, tiny yet potent. And even in the darkness of my bedroom, I could feel them germinating, promising a future where power, justice, and satisfaction would belong solely to me. The following weeks were a study in patience, discipline, and the quiet accumulation of power. I began devoting myself to every opportunity that would grant me independence, honing skills, networking, and quietly observing the world around me, while keeping my emotions tightly controlled. Each decision was deliberate. I invested in projects that others dismissed, sought mentorship from people whose insights had been undervalued, and built a network that, to the outside eye, seemed casual, even incidental. But behind the surface, every move was part of a larger, carefully constructed plan. I opened a small but strategically positioned business, one that allowed me to understand finance, negotiation, and influence in ways I had never fully grasped before. I maintained the appearance of calm acceptance around my family, attending social gatherings and exchanging pleasantries as if nothing had happened, all while my mind constantly mapped their weaknesses and their assumptions. I observed my sister boasting about her upcoming wedding, hearing her describe venues, designers, and the grandeur she imagined, completely unaware that I was silently positioning myself to control the very spaces she believed she owned. Every laugh, every mention of plans, became a data point, feeding into the web I was spinning with quiet precision. I learned to manage my frustration, to mask my burning desire for revenge behind an exterior of polite indifference. And in doing so, I discovered a strength I had never known existed. I could walk into a room filled with people who had underestimated me, and without uttering a word, command respect through the subtlety of my presence, the confidence in my posture, and the sharpness in my observations. Money flowed slowly at first, investments matured, and opportunities multiplied. Each victory, no matter how small, felt like the laying of another brick in a fortress that only I could see. I began to understand that revenge was not about immediate satisfaction. It was a long game, a test of endurance, intelligence, and foresight. And as I navigated this new reality, I realized that the same family who had dismissed me as insignificant would soon find themselves ensnared in the consequences of their own arrogance. Powerless to alter the course that I had so meticulously charted, I spent nights drafting mental blueprints, imagining scenarios in which every small detail contributed to the ultimate unveiling of their reckoning. I cultivated contacts in the wedding industry, learned about contracts and property rights, and familiarized myself with the legal intricacies of venue ownership, all while keeping my family completely unaware that I was quietly laying claim to the very elements that had once been used to humiliate me. In this silent preparation, I found purpose and solace, a knowledge that the day of revelation would not only satisfy my sense of justice, but also serve as a testament to the resilience and strategic mind that I had cultivated from pain. Months turned into years, and the transformation I had quietly engineered began to manifest in ways my family could never have anticipated. The small investments, the countless hours of meticulous planning, and the endless patience all culminated in a power I held entirely for myself. Hidden beneath the guise of ordinary life, I had become financially independent, respected in my industry, and most importantly, invisible in their eyes while simultaneously controlling threads they could not even perceive. The knowledge that I had secured ownership stakes in multiple venues, including the very hall my sister had boasted about for her extravagant wedding, filled me with a quiet thrill, the kind that does not shout but hums with unshakable certainty. My family continued to live under the illusion that everything was proceeding according to their narrative, blind to the fact that I now held leverage that could completely upend their meticulously constructed plans. Every call from vendors, every conversation with contractors, every signed document that bore my name was a testament to the silent rise of a woman they had once thought powerless, a force carefully cultivated from years of disregard and betrayal. I watched as my sister's excitement grew, as my parents celebrated her choices with pride, and I remained a shadow, a quiet observer armed with the knowledge that their sense of control was entirely illusory. The thrill of waiting, the patience of watching their hubris play out while I held the key to the ultimate revelation, was intoxicating. I spent my days refining details, making sure that on the wedding day, the staff, the contracts, and the logistical arrangements would all be under my control, ensuring a moment of perfect irony, when the family would finally recognize the true power I possessed. In private moments, I imagined their faces, the shock that would flash across my parents' expressions, the flustered panic on my sister's, and the realization that their arrogance had blinded them to the quiet strength that had grown under their noses. Each scenario I rehearsed was laced with precision, every eventuality accounted for, because I knew that true power lay not in emotion but in preparation, strategy, and the patience to wait for the perfect moment. And in this process, I discovered a deeper truth. Revenge, when executed with intelligence and calm resolve, is more fulfilling than any immediate retaliation. It allows the wrong to rise above, to assert dominance not through anger, but through proof of capability, through the undeniable weight of achievement. I became a master of subtle influence, commanding respect in ways that required no confrontation, no shouting, no pleading, only presence, competence, and the hidden knowledge that I would decide the ultimate outcome. By the time the wedding approached, I was ready. A woman transformed, silent but unassailable, armed with the culmination of years of planning and the assurance that the reckoning they had unknowingly invited would arrive with precision, leaving them to confront the consequences of their own choices. As the wedding day drew near, the atmosphere in the house became charged with excitement, completely oblivious to the silent storm that hovered just beyond their perception. My sister spoke endlessly about her dress, the floral arrangements, and the guest list, each conversation dripping with self-importance and the certainty that she was at the center of the universe. My parents beamed with pride, utterly convinced that their decisions had secured her happiness, never once considering that their actions had sown the seeds of their own humiliation. I played my part flawlessly, offering polite nods, occasional smiles, and the kind of empty congratulations that concealed every ounce of my carefully nurtured strategy. Internally, I catalogued every detail, every phone call, every interaction, ensuring that on the day of the wedding, nothing could derail the moment of revelation I had envisioned for so long. I monitored every contract, confirmed every payment, and verified the ownership documents repeatedly, not out of insecurity, but to ensure absolute precision. I knew that the grandeur my family had so desperately pursued would be the stage upon which I would unveil the full measure of my strength, and the thought of it sent a thrill surging through me that was both calm and exhilarating. There was a profound satisfaction in the knowledge that I could stand silently, allowing their arrogance to guide them into the perfect position for their own reckoning. I observed my sister practicing her walk down the aisle, every glance in the mirror reflecting a confidence I knew was built on illusion rather than substance, and I felt a quiet surge of anticipation for the moment she would discover just how fragile that illusion truly was. My parents continued making arrangements, oblivious to the fact that the hall they believed they had booked was now entirely under my ownership, and that the staff they assumed would cater to their whims. were legally obliged to answer only to me. Every conversation, every laugh, every gesture of pride they exhibited only strengthened my resolve, reinforcing the precision with which I would deliver justice, not with anger or confrontation, but with undeniable proof of my capability and power. In these final days before the wedding, I moved with the confidence of someone whose patience and careful planning had created an unstoppable inevitability. I felt a calm satisfaction as I imagined the exact sequence of events that would unfold, the expressions that would flash across faces that had long dismissed me, the realization that the very foundation upon which they had built their celebrations was under my control. The air buzzed with anticipation, though they felt none of it. The irony of the situation was delicious, and I savored every silent second, knowing that the moment of truth would arrive with the dramatic precision that only years of careful preparation could produce. By the time the sun rose on the day of the wedding, I was ready not just to witness their shock, but to claim the empowerment that years of patience, resilience, and strategic action had rightfully earned me. The morning of the wedding arrived with an almost theatrical brilliance, the sunlight streaming through the windows as if nature itself was conspiring to illuminate the scene of the ultimate revelation. My sister flitted through the house, adjusting her gown, practicing smiles that she expected to charm the entire gathering, while my parents fussed over last-minute details, completely unaware of the quiet storm that I embodied. I arrived at the venue earlier than anyone else, blending seamlessly with the staff, my presence unnoticed yet commanding every action from behind the scenes. Every arrangement had been double-checked. The seating, the floral placements, the security measures, the legal documents confirming my ownership of the hall. Everything orchestrated to ensure that the moment of unveiling would strike with perfect impact. As I moved through the corridors, overseeing the final touches, I relished the irony that the very people who had once dismissed my existence, who had stripped me of the jewelry that symbolized my identity and worth, were now entirely dependent on my authority. The staff, trained and briefed by me, acknowledged every instruction with a professionalism that left no room for error, while the family remained blissfully ignorant, moving through the venue as if the world revolved solely around their excitement. My heart beat steadily, a calm rhythm that contrasted with the storm of anticipation swelling within me. I imagined the exact moment when my parents would realize that the wedding they had assumed was theirs to control was, in reality, mine to command. Every detail was meticulously curated to maximize the shock and the justice I had long envisioned. I walked past the grand entrance where the bridal party would make their debut, imagining the expressions that would ripple across their faces as the legal documents, prominently displayed with my name on them, were revealed. I could see my sister's confident smile falter, my mother's eyes widen in disbelief, and my father's pride crumble under the weight of realization. The ceremony hall, resplendent in its beauty, had become a stage not just for celebration, but for retribution, a place where the culmination of years of careful planning would unfold in real time. Every flower, every chair, every glint of crystal reflected the painstaking effort I had invested, and every moment of waiting intensified the anticipation. The irony was exquisite. They had spent months arranging the perfect wedding, believing themselves to be in control, when in reality, they had become players in a narrative entirely dictated by the quiet, underestimated daughter they had wronged. As guests began to arrive, filling the hall with chatter and laughter, I moved to the center, calm and poised, fully aware that the curtain was about to rise on the scene I had envisioned for years. The time for silent preparation was over. The moment of reckoning was imminent, and every breath I took was filled with the quiet, electrifying satisfaction of inevitability. The moment of revelation arrived with a precision that was almost cinematic. The kind of timing that turns anticipation into a tangible, almost electric force. As the family, blissfully unaware, approached the grand entrance to begin the ceremony, my calm presence drew their eyes without effort. The staff, acting with the professionalism and subtle authority I had instilled, guided my parents and sister toward the registration desk, where the contracts and ownership documents had been placed under a clear, polished glass display. The name, Avery, gleamed prominently in every line. Official stamps and signatures, asserting my ownership of the hall, and every operational detail within it. My sister's confident smile faltered almost instantly, her eyes widening as she scanned the documents, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process what she was seeing. My parents froze, their expressions shifting from casual pride to disbelief, horror, and finally, a dawning recognition that they had been outmaneuvered. I took a single deliberate step forward, letting the shock settle across their faces before speaking. My voice calm, yet carrying the weight of authority they had never associated with me. "You sold my jewelry to fund this wedding," I said softly, letting each word resonate through the space. "And now, this wedding exists only because of me. Every flower, every chair, every contract, you are beholden to the very daughter you dismissed." My mother's lips parted in a futile attempt to speak. My father's jaw clenched, and my sister's face drained of color, her earlier arrogance evaporating under the reality that she was standing on a stage, entirely orchestrated by someone she had considered powerless. I allowed the pause to stretch, letting the truth sink into every corner of the hall, every heartbeat of my family, and every eye that now glanced between the documents and me. The staff, silent and precise, followed my instructions impeccably, guiding the ceremony in such a way that the family could neither ignore nor bypass the reality I had meticulously crafted. It was a quiet domination, a subtle yet undeniable declaration of the consequences of underestimating me. I watched as their disbelief morphed into regret, as the weight of their decisions settled heavily upon them. The irony was exquisite, a sweet, almost palpable justice. They had intended to control and humiliate, that they had unwittingly become the subjects of my silent, unwavering power. And in that moment, as every detail I had curated converged to create the scene, I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph, not rooted in anger, but in the undeniable proof that I had grown, planned, and executed in a way they could never undo. I had transformed the very foundation of their celebration into a testament of resilience, intelligence, and quiet vengeance. My heart swelled with satisfaction, knowing that their arrogance had been met with the precise, unassailable authority of a woman they had long underestimated. As the initial shock rippled through my family, I allowed myself the rare luxury of a small, controlled smile, a subtle acknowledgement of the culmination of years of careful planning, silent observation, and relentless perseverance. My sister's face, once the epitome of self-assuredness and vanity, was now a mask of confusion, shame, and disbelief. Her eyes darted from the documents to me and back again, as if seeking a loophole, a flaw in the narrative I had so meticulously constructed. But there was none. My parents, too, stood rooted in a combination of awe and regret. The proud composure they had carried into the day, now reduced to a fragile veneer that could not withstand the weight of realization. I took another step forward, letting the space between us serve as a bridge between the past injustices and the present reckoning. "You believed my silence was weakness," I said, my voice steady, measured, and infused with the authority that had taken years to cultivate. "You believed I could be ignored, that my worth could be determined by how convenient I was to you. But every step I have taken, every decision I have made, every ounce of patience and strategy has brought me here. to a position where your assumptions no longer hold any power over me. I paused, letting my words sink deeply, observing as my sister's lips quivered and my mother's eyes glistened with the realization of their misjudgment. This hall, this wedding, every element you believed you controlled. You were standing on foundations I now own. I continued, each syllable precise, unwavering. And it is here, in the brilliance you sought to command, that the truth is undeniable. Your choices were made at my expense, and now the consequences are yours to witness. Silence enveloped the room, punctuated only by the quiet movement of staff who subtly reinforced my authority, a living reminder that every arrangement had been executed under my careful direction. Their inability to respond, their inability to undo or deflect, was the purest form of justice I could imagine. The humiliation of powerlessness, inflicted not through violence, but through the undeniable demonstration of capability, resilience, and strategic brilliance. I watched as the weight of comprehension settled over them, a heavy, almost suffocating realization that the quiet daughter they had ignored, the one they had deemed inconsequential, had orchestrated a reality in which they were entirely subject to her control. And in that moment I felt an extraordinary clarity, a quiet triumph that was neither vengeful nor cruel but just a reaffirmation of the truth I had always known about myself. That strength, patience, and intelligence are forces far more formidable than favoritism, arrogance, or entitlement. The reckoning was complete, not with shouts or confrontations, but with the piercingly clear reality that I had risen above their betrayal, and in doing so, redefined every expectation they had ever imposed upon me. The final moments of the ceremony unfolded with a gravity that felt almost surreal, the air thick with the mixture of celebration and the heavy weight of my family's astonishment. My sister, once the embodiment of arrogance and certainty, now moved through the hall with hesitant steps, her gaze flickering nervously toward me, as if the very walls could whisper the truth I had long kept hidden. My parents, faces pale and stiff with disbelief, attempted to regain composure, but the authority I had silently claimed was undeniable, and each of their movements reflected the subtle but absolute shift in power. I stood tall, calm, and composed, allowing the room itself to reflect the culmination of years of careful planning, patience, and resilience. Every flower, every seat, every glittering crystal that adorned the hall now bore witness not just to a wedding, but to a transformation, the metamorphosis of a girl who had been dismissed, underestimated, and betrayed into a woman whose strength, intelligence, and strategic brilliance could not be denied. As I surveyed the scene, I felt the exhilaration of quiet triumph, the deep satisfaction of witnessing justice unfold not through confrontation, but through the undeniable truth of capability. I moved through the space with effortless authority, directing staff, ensuring that every detail proceeded perfectly, while my family scrambled to reconcile their assumptions with the reality before them. And when the moment arrived to speak, I let my voice carry the weight of the story I had lived, of the betrayal endured and the power earned. "You sold my jewelry for her wedding," I began, my tone calm, but cutting through the murmurs of the gathering. "And now, this wedding stands because of me. Every detail, every flourish, every arrangement, my effort, my planning, my strength. This is not just a ceremony. It is proof of the consequences of underestimating me." My sister's lips parted in shock. My mother's hands trembled, and my father's posture sagged with reluctant acknowledgement. For the first time, they could not dismiss me, could not rewrite the narrative, and could not ignore the quiet force I had become. And as the applause of the guests, unaware of the full drama unfolding behind the scenes, filled the hall, I felt the culmination of every tear, every plan, every calculated step settle into a profound sense of justice and empowerment. In that moment, I knew that betrayal had forged me, patience had strengthened me, and careful strategy had crowned me with undeniable authority. My story, once marked by theft and disregard, now shown as a testament to resilience, intelligence, and quiet vengeance, the kind that changes reality without a single raised voice. And to every viewer watching this unfold, let this story serve as a reminder. Strength is forged in silence. Revenge can be precise and elegant, and the quietest among us may rise to command the world. If you've been captivated by my journey, don't just witness the transformation. Follow the strategy, and embrace the resilience that defines every step of this tale. Like and subscribe, and see how a girl who was dismissed, underestimated, and betrayed became the undeniable force that no one in her family could ever ignore.